Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, and this is your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today, we're going to do a weekend weed review, followed by the winners and losers in September for cannabis publicly traded companies and which countries are supporting cannabis legalization. On the line with us is Dan Kimmis, our CBD correspondent with Good CBD Products.
I feel like a winner today, Chronic. I'm a winner. I'm a winner.
We all are when we're listening to Talking Hedge. According to the MJ Business Daily report, there's a momentous cannabis banking vote that passed last week. There's the vaping crisis fallout, and Massachusetts approves a cannabis cafe delivery and more. So starting with the House vote, the cannabis banking bill with strong bipartisan support went out last week. We're still waiting for the Senate to vote on that. That's going to change everything from automation, scaling, being able to expand, being able to afford more SKUs. All of that stuff is going to be huge. So that was a landmark bill that was voted 321 to 103, offering pathways for cannabis businesses to gain access to traditional services and products. Game changer, Dan.
I want to know who those other 103 were. Are they guilty of treason? ?
I think a lot of them were liberals that wanted more in the bill. I don't know exactly what they wanted or who they are, but yeah, they always want more, don't they? Looking at some other stuff from the news of last week, looks like there's some mixed results from vape sales. I think Los Angeles wanted to ban all vaping. That would be a catastrophe for the industry. There's massive fallouts for this news and the vaping illness epidemic that's involved over 800 illnesses and at least 12 deaths.
I think, of all of the things we cover, right, this one seems to be the most, it has the most gravity and potential impact, right? Because just things like people following or municipalities following other municipalities' leads, right? The domino effect. Geez, this guy bans it, so do those people. All that stuff, Chronic, with regards to businesses on the ground, there's some real fear. I've been out in the field the last few days, and again, some of our partners, some of the people on the ground, these things are, very minor contributors to their sales volume. For others, these are some of the prime movers. Right. And if there's fear about that stuff, man, that's crazy.
So last month we went to Portland for the Cannabis Science Conference, where I bought a Cannagar and I bought a vape pen. The vape pen, I believe, is cut with glycol or something else from Dab Brothers down in Portland, and it makes my throat really scratchy. I haven't liked it. I actually temporarily misplaced it for about a week or two. Just found it the other day. Started smoking on it again, and I'm like, wow, this is really bad. This morning, I feel like I have kind of a sore throat, kind of a cold, extra mucus. So I'm not going to smoke that pen anymore, and I'm not going to use that brand, Dab Brothers, out of Oregon any longer. And I'm going to make sure that whatever I do smoke is not cut with any thinners like glycol. I'm over it. And if I need to just continue to smoke my, quote, medical cannabis, the flower that I get, $500 a pound, I'm going to continue to do that until these guys can pull their head out of their ass. It's unacceptable to be able to cut that with glycol and make my throat scratchy and all of that. It's ridiculous.
Hey, so take a minute and educate us. So what would you consider is a safe vape cart? Is it just material and no cut? What's in there?
First off, it's the hardware. So a lot of the cheap hardware, I was consulting a company down in California, and the guy wanted the cheapest carts possible. And I pretty much stopped taking his call. I'm not into, find the cheapest stuff. And there's better ways of doing things. And this individual was probably one of the more rude people. But aside from that, the cart itself is dipped in the cheap carts. That is, those cartridges are dipped in diesel fuel. So if you're looking for something really, really cheap and you get these carts, make sure that it's not too cheap and dipped in diesel fuel to clean it, because what that will do is leach out heavy metals. So you have heavy metals in soil. And so when you're growing, you need to be able to flush that product out. If you don't flush out the heavy metals and the nutrients and everything, you're going to get a harsh cough. On top of that, you could have faulty or black market carts that have cheap ways of cleaning it, like diesel fuel that actually makes this leach lead or heavy metals. So there's a lot of different issues out there. Just go to a rec shop that's regulated and a brand that you trust. But even if you do trust it, ask them what they're cutting it with, because if there's glycol in there, you're going to feel that in your throat. So I just stick with brands that I know, that I trust, that are reputable, that are as close to organic as you can, even without being able to get that FDA approval for the most part.
Right. Again, this one of the recurrent themes on the Talking Hedge, your cannabis business podcast, is at some point there will be national brands and national trust. But until there isn't. So it's regional brands and regional trust. And then, for instance, you might, this is the thing I keep running into. It's like our Oregon experience. In a lot of ways, you got to try, because the information isn't readily available. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And so it really is on the consumer. And that has to change for the industry to scale, right? I mean, it can scale some, but until you're to the point where everybody's having consistently good experiences across state boundaries, things like that, you're not a real industry.
It'll get a little bit more real when people can kind of see and experience the industry as it pertains to cafes or medical marijuana lounges. You can go inside there and vape and dab and smoke outside. And so Massachusetts has kind of made that next step towards allowing for delivery in cafes to exist. So this MJ Business article goes on to say, quote, regulators approved the creation of new cannabis business licenses for two types of businesses: social consumption and delivery services. The licenses will be reserved for social equity and economic empowerment applicants for 2 years. And regulators could start considering delivery applications in a couple of months, but cafe applications will take much longer. So the takeaway, according to MJ Business Daily, is that consumer demand for cannabis delivery services in Massachusetts will be strong thanks to the recreational outlets, and there will be lots of applicants and first movers that'll have key advantages in capitalizing on that delivery market. Part of that early bird advantage could come from developing a meticulous application ready to present regulators before other competitors do. We're also working on a consumption lounge bill. Hopefully that'll be done this week. As chair of this committee to overturn a felony on owning and operating, or I should say operating and maintaining a marijuana lounge, there's a Class C felony on that. So hopefully this bill that we're writing will reverse that, as well as put in place some steps to allow for the consumption in Washington State. So
Hey, how many hours a week do you put on that bill?
So we started in March, and I probably put in 40 hours when I first started. It was the first week, that's all I did. And then I put in probably 3 hours a day, and then 2, and then 1. So by the time, after the first 3 months, that 50-page bill was written. And then just a week and a half ago, we took that 50-page bill and shrunk it down to about 13 pages. It's currently about 9 right now. And I probably only spend maybe an hour a day on it now, as doing edits and as we meet once a week. But it's been a lot of work.
And then, I mean, that isn't just you, right? There's several other people who have been putting time in.
We have a committee. Those committee members also have full-time jobs, and the majority of people actually have not been active. It was one of the concerns I had, being part of the committee and being the chair. I wanted only active members, but it's kind of hard when it's volunteer. How do you fire people? And so I am having some issue right now with some folks who haven't been active, and yet at the very last minute have come to me with like 4 pages of demands. And it's really frustrating. You could have been active this whole time, but you waited until the last minute. And so I am not into politics. I am not diplomatic. I'm a businessman. I'm very direct, and I have no problem telling people that they're inappropriate, bringing demands at the last minute, which I've had to do. So it is very frustrating. It's not something I want to do. Lobbying and being in politics is not something I want to do. I just had to do this. I felt compelled.
So, and then it sounds to me like you've got probably over 100 hours in this thing?
Over the last 6 months, yeah, easy.
Yeah. What's your rate, brother?
I charge anywhere from 250 to $600 an hour, minimum $1,000 retainer. So this would probably be close to a $50,000 bill if I were to charge for all of my time.
There you go. One of the things I always like to point out is, again, this is it's an early, it's a startup industry, right? And so somebody's got to do the work, and somewhere there's either got to be the budget or somebody willing to do the work. I guess we'll use the term pro bono, right? And so, good on you and good on the committee members, even those that have only managed to give a few hours. Now those that are dragging you backwards, come on now, come on, pick it up. But in your case, way to go, Crowley.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, it's been some decent experience learning about politics and the political sabotage or saboteurs, I guess. They're out there. They want to be involved. They want their name on everything, even though they're not willing to do any of the work. So it is frustrating, but again, it's the passion, it's the drive that you kind of have to just put in front of the BS. So hopefully we'll have that written by the end of this week. But that's just stage one. Stage two is then bringing it to the Capitol, getting sponsorship from House reps and senators, taking that feedback, editing it down, and then getting it driven into the floor so that it can have a vote in the House or Senate. So, I mean, this is just the beginning. We still have another 3 to 6 months to go if it doesn't get initially accepted. It's going to be a lot more work ahead of us.
Again, that old metaphor, right? A sprinter's pace and a marathon to run.
That's right. The cannabis industry as a whole can follow that same metaphor. And so this Benzinga article goes into describe the gainers and losers, or winners and losers, from last month. Starting with Future Farm Technologies surged 17%. They're only valued at 5 cents, however. Kushco Holdings, I think they're a local, or at least they were local. Their shares jumped 17%. Looking at Nabis Holdings, they are up 6.5%. Not too shabby. On the Golden Leaf Holdings, up 6%. And then some of the losers, you're looking at Cannabis Science. Their shares slid down over 10%. Cureleaf fell by 8.5%. It's probably shareholders taking some money off the top. Crone Life Sciences down 7.5%. Halo is down 7%. MedMen Pharmaceuticals closed at 23 cents. Ouch. So a lot of these stocks are kind of coming down. You might want to take a look at a portfolio or an index. On Wednesday this week, we have our weekly crystal ball experience. It's for entertainment purposes only. Rohit Srivastava, he's the chief investment officer and portfolio manager of Saroj and Banu Fund. And that is an AI-based algorithm. And so he's got some really good experience managing this portfolio. And so we will see what the future holds later this week. And now we're looking at an article about who is legalizing marijuana now. So we've got a couple of countries on the lookout for marijuana legalization, starting with Canada, followed by the US, and then Chile is the third most supportive country as it pertains to cannabis legalization.
Yeah, we've been getting some international pings, right? And one of the things that's kind of funny is, I guess, I'll refer to it as, quote, down south, but Colombia, Chile, Brazil. It's interesting. Again, I have a lot to learn. I spend most of my time on the ground in the western region of the U.S., so that's what I know. But I'm kind of excited to learn a little bit about, international biz, I guess. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, Colombia came on my radar almost 2 years ago now when I was in Denver for the Indo Expo. I met a couple of folks from Mexico City who were drooling over the idea of importing oil from Colombia. So I was first kind of brought into that whole idea of Colombia being a mass producer of oil, 55-gallon drums and phenomenal terroir and cheap labor, all adding up to an amazing opportunity. And looking at it now, you have Curaleaf down there, Canadian cannabis company that's public, and looking at driving that market even further. Chile is interesting though. Behind Chile is Australia, and then the UK, followed by Germany, Spain, France, Brazil, and Japan. A lot of those are interesting considering Uruguay isn't on the list. Holland isn't on the list. So we'll kind of see. I mean, the UK doesn't really seem all that open to me, but time will tell.
Wherever there's people, there's going to be cannabis. It's that simple.
I have no doubt about that. Germany is incredibly supportive. They have 70 million people that are available to take cannabis with insurance. So I feel like that should be higher than Chile, but I suppose that there's a reason for that. None of which is listed in the article, though. So we're just kind of inferring why they're on this list. Again, it's Canada, US, and Chile in the top three, followed by Australia, the UK, Germany, Spain, and then the bottom three is France, Brazil, and Japan. Brazil is interesting because they're growing so much hemp. Again, there's an individual down there who's Canadian-based, but is growing 100,000 hectares, 300,000 plus acres down there. He has 124,000 hectares. It's a lot, plus 10,000 acres in Montana, plus whatever he has in Toronto. And so opportunities in Brazil, I don't know if all of that is going to be specifically for the Brazilian market. They can process it there or process it in Puerto Rico for the US market. But nonetheless, there's some opportunities with these countries kind of leading the way and normalizing it, hopefully professionalizing it, starting with Canada this month. October 17th is actually round 2.0 for cannabis, where they're able to have more beverages, more concentrates other than just CO2 and ethanol. They can have more concentrates that have different solvents beginning this month, but probably not on the shelves until December. So that's going to be exciting to see where the sales go, if they even go up, because it's been a little bit of a disappointment. Some dismal sales out of Canada recently.
Hey, enlighten me a little bit. If you were going to go learn a country, right? So you're going to go learn someplace that isn't where you're living right now, and you're going to learn about their cannabis market. How long is it going to take you?
If you wanted to go into a market and learn about the cannabis industry, I would say it probably is going to take you a solid year. There's just different regions, like Seattle and Portland are only 3 hours away, and yet the culture is different. And we've noticed that based on concentrates and flower, everything is segmented based on preference. We like coffee here, but Portland seems to like it even more versus Vancouver. I was just up there, and it's a completely different market. So I think in order to get a full understanding of what the people are doing, how they're doing it, and what they're going to be doing, is probably going to take you at least a year of being involved in that area, being involved in communities and groups and business networking opportunities in order to really understand what that particular region is doing, which is why it's been so beneficial for us over the last half decade, having been in Alaska and California, Denver, Nevada, Oregon, British Columbia, Toronto, Washington, the petri dish shithole of them all. Has really given us an opportunity. Being in Washington, I think, is probably an advantage. It's the worst place to be as a cannabis business, and the best place to be as an analyst and ancillary. I'm glad I'm not a producer, processor, retailer. I would hate being in this state, but I feel like the experience it's given me has put me on a different platform in order to avoid and prepare for worst case scenarios in other emerging markets.
I dig that. That was a solid answer, Chronic. You're on the Talking Hedge, your cannabis business podcast.
So with that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and we're out.